Welcome to LYLAS. If you grew up in the 90s, you probably know what that stands for. But if not, we love you like a sis. And we've got a special guest on the show today. Yeah, Sarah, take it away. Tell us about our guest.
Well, I am truly very honored that she has agreed to come on this podcast, but more importantly, that she agreed to come in my life as much as she has, literally for about the last 8 years or so. And Candice is one of those women who, whenever you get to know her, you realize, maybe even more than what you do, how inspirational and how much you're able to do so effectively that it almost puts you in check and just makes you say, gosh, I want to be like her whenever I grow up. Like, that to me is Candice. And the wild part I think about our friendship is that we all three of us went through high school all together, but I mean, I think I can safely say we knew each other, but we weren't really friends in high school. It really wasn't until like the last 8 years where Candice truly, and I've even said this on the podcast before, like whenever I think about my friends who are still like around here, Candice is number one. Like, she is my all-time go-to. Text her anytime, see her, any of those types of things. And she is just always that person, no matter what is going on in her life, is there. And maybe the most beautiful part about Candice is how humble she is about everything in her life that she has experienced. Again, in her 40s, but has done so with such grace, resilience, inspiration, that it just, whenever you hear this, and I hope that some of you guys have your tissues or whatever ready, that you are just ready to be just put in awe of what all a person can go through at different stages in life and still be going, like with a full tank all the time. And I think that that is just why I was so, I mean, for weeks, months since we started doing this, I was like, Candice has to come on. Candice has to come on. And finally, whenever we asked her, it was just getting our schedules coordinated before we could make this happen. And so thank you so much for being willing to come on here. Yeah, and really share what I believe is the ultimate story of what, just as a word, love means, and how that can, I guess, change over time, but that just what that word in and of itself looks like, means, and is lived in a person. So thank you so much.
Why are you going to make me cry right in the beginning?
Well, I warned you and I warned our audience last week that I would probably be a mess. And so, true to form, here we go.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you guys for finding me interesting enough, I guess, to share this podcast. It's one of my favorites. There's two that I listen to regularly, but
what are those? I'm just curious.
Well, LYLAS, obviously, and actually another classmate. Can I give her a shout out?
Mm-hmm, yeah, absolutely.
Beth Wall Gordon has a podcast, Crimes in Closets. So I listen to both of you guys every Monday.
I love that.
I mean, sometimes I have to split these, you know.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we all have our favorites.
My car ride's only 30 minutes. So, but yeah, I appreciate you guys thinking my story's worth listening to. I guess I spoke with Sarah and asked where we wanted to begin. So I think probably the biggest thing that sticks out to people is this nickname that I acquired when I was 26 years old, which was a widow. It's probably someone's least favorite nickname, I would have to think. When I was 26 years old, my husband, Chris, passed away unexpectedly from a massive heart attack. It was, I guess when you think about losing someone you love, you never want to see them suffer or linger in any way. And I think maybe part of me always thought, well, maybe this is okay, because he was he was there one day and gone the next. So I didn't have to watch anything like that. But with that set of circumstances comes its own grief and just sense of profound loss that you just have to take one day at a time. And honestly, sometimes one day at a time was too overwhelming. Sometimes it literally had to be 1 minute at a time, just one breath at a time. Many times, my friends and family would stop in to check on me, and they're like, "Have you showered today?" I'm like, I can't remember if I've showered this week, but we did it. And at that time, I had 2 daughters. One daughter was, she was 7, getting ready to turn 8, and our baby was 16 and a half months old. So unfortunately, she does not remember her dad in a true sense of remembering. We've told so many stories so many times that it almost feels like a memory to her that she knows her dad. But until she was, I don't know, about 8 years old, we went to the cemetery regularly for her to visit her dad. She does not really do that anymore. It just got to be too painful, and we'll go at her pace when she's ready to go visit. But yeah, so for the next few years, we just kind of took it a minute at a time. And I don't know. There are days I don't know how we made it through, but we did. And both of the girls are doing well. My oldest daughter, who we lovingly refer to as Car Baby, she is getting ready to turn 22 in September. And my youngest daughter will be 16 in November. So a lot of time has passed since Chris passed away. And I don't know.
Yeah. So it's been what, like 15 years approximately?
14 and a half years. He died April of 2009.
2009. I want you to get back at some point and tell us why you call her Car Baby, but also I'm just thinking this through, like you were dealing with your own grief, and then you had these 2 little girls looking at you, trying to process their grief. I mean, did you have support during that time, or were you just okay?
Yeah. I have really great parents. And at the time, I still actually had my grandparents, who have always been a really big spiritual center for me.
Yeah.
So they were there for me, but I'm kind of starting in the middle. So to fully understand the amount of grief maybe that I had suffered in a small amount of time, while I was pregnant with our youngest daughter, I actually unexpectedly lost my baby brother, and he was 10 years old. I was about 3 months pregnant with Maya when I got the call that my brother had passed away from meningitis.
Oh, wow.
So, you both are married, and you understand most of the time in a marriage, your partner is your best friend. Mm-hmm. Yes, you have other friends, but they're the ones that love you no matter what. Mm-hmm. So anything else that I had been through to that point, Chris had been there. And then all of a sudden I found myself in a situation where that one constant was gone. I mean, who do you turn to when it is your best friend? Mm-hmm. And I can look back at it now and kind of chuckle. He was older than me. There was a 16-year age difference between us, and he was just very organized with everything that I wasn't at that point, because again, I was 26 years old. But he he took care of everything. He took care of finances. He took care of just literally anything you think of. He did it. Okay. And I just, with death, there's a lot of business. There's in the beginning, you don't even have time to be sad in the beginning, because there are plans that you have to make. And how are you going to pay for a funeral? And oh my gosh, do we have life insurance? And just things like that. And I remember walking into his office thinking, I don't even know where to start. And I opened his filing cabinet, and in the front was a bright red folder that said "in case of emergency." And he had all of our life insurance. Sorry, he had all of our life insurance information, any emergency information that I would need. If he wasn't there. So again, he wasn't there, but he was still taking care of us. And it was just kind of then that I knew, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to do it, but he, I don't know, he was a pretty amazing guy. As Sarah already knows, and I'm sure you already know, I have since also found another amazing guy. I joke often that God blessed me with 2 really amazing husbands. I get a few strange looks, but it's okay. It's still the truth. I got off on a tangent. I'm sorry. I don't even remember what you.
No.
I mean, as you're saying this, I'm like, this is actual thoughts that I've had. Like, if something happened to my husband, I would be right where you were, trying to figure like, where do I start? And I told him that not so long ago because he lost his job and then got a new job. And so we were looking at health or life insurance again and all of those things. And I'm like, we have all these different accounts. And I'm like, it's all Greek to me. Like my brain just doesn't work with numbers and I don't understand, like stocks. And I just, that's not my forte. And I was like, I need you to simplify this because if I were ever in your position, what you went through at the age of 26 at 41, I would be like just floundering. And I'm sure I could probably figure it out, but just that overwhelming sensation of not only am I trying to process grief and it just, tragic loss on top of it, like you said, the business side of it, like it just becomes so overwhelming. I mean, I get overwhelmed just thinking about normal day-to-day business transactions, much less like having to deal with big things like paying for a funeral, deciding where to bury someone. I mean, I think that that's a big thing that we started to have these conversations. A couple of years ago, we sat down and did some like plans for like, what if we both perished at the same time? We have young children, like who gets our kids? We sort of, and those are really icky conversations and things to think about, but so necessary. I mean, I was definitely influenced from some friends of mine that had just done the same thing. And they're like, nobody likes it, but it will give you peace of mind, especially if you all travel. You won't have, it's taken care of. Your will, everything is there. And so just listening to you having lived that at such a young age, I can't imagine how grateful you were to find that red folder that had it laid out for you. Like, here's your starting point. Because you think about how many people don't have that.
100%. The majority of people, especially people our age, they don't. Even now in our 40s, people don't want to think about death. I mean, nobody wants to think about it, but it is necessary. I mean, you literally never know. And I'm very thankful that he was such a, organized person. He didn't think that's what was going to happen. He just did it for the what if or just in case. And it became a stern reality for me after he died. Oh gosh, if something happened, I'm all the kids have. So if something happens to me, then what? That's not something that you think about at 26. Who do you want raising your children in your stead if you are no longer able to do so? And that's a hard decision because people are like, well, why don't you want me? Well, why not me? I'm like, well, I just want to choose the person that I think will raise them most closely to the way I would raise them.
Yeah.
And keep them safe.
Yeah.
But it all kind of seems like a lifetime ago in a way, and yesterday all at the same time. At that point in my life, honestly, the only person that I had ever really known that had been sort of in my situation were substantially older, with the exception of one of our classmates who had lost a spouse maybe like 2 years prior to that, but she and I weren't close, so it's not as if we we spoke briefly, but not a lot. And unfortunately, I did lose some friends in that period of my life, and it's not they weren't being malicious. And I don't think poorly of anyone who wasn't in my life after that. That's heavy, people don't know what to say. And I think it was just easier to put space, and that was okay. That was okay, because one thing that becomes abundantly clear whenever you lose someone close is your circle matters. So my circle doesn't have to be big, it just has to be important. And I still kind of live my life that way. So I don't need a lot of sometimes friends. I need just a few good friends and I'm set. So I've tried to teach my kids the very same thing. It's harder, when you're in high school and all the problems seem so big.
Yeah.
And they are, but things change.
It's wild. I have so many questions about how you moved on too, about how you continued and then found love again after loss. And
yeah, what does that look like? Like, how did you even, like, that's the part that's so
messy.
baffling. Welcome to life.
It's so messy.
So messy.
So for me, one thing I did find, especially since the majority of people who were widows, hate that word. It's such a terrible word, right?
Terrible word. I agree.
Because you think of an old spinster lady when you say widow.
Yeah.
But so because I was young, people want to say something to comfort you. And a lot of times for me, I found that their go-to would be, you're young, you'll find someone else. Now, was that true? 100%. Did I know it to be true? Yes. Was I thinking about it in the moment? No. That wasn't a comfort to me, because in that moment, all I knew is literally one day I was married and happy. And 12 hours later, he was gone. I'll tell you a quick little story about his last day here. And this was, I know sometimes you guys touch on religion and sometimes you don't. For me, this was very much God was in this moment for me. We had been on vacation, a staycation. The weather had been really lousy all week, so we had a very low-key week. So I was really blessed with a lot of time with him that last week. But the day before, it was beautiful, and he had been working outside and he wanted to wash our cars. And he had said something to me that it was a little snippy. And the day before that, Candias probably would have snipped back or pouted. But for some reason, I didn't. I just kind of let it go. And, we went on with our daily plans, and I was visiting with my mom, who was in town. And I called him and asked if he would come to my grandparents that night for dinner. And he did. So he was able to see my grandparents. My aunt and uncle stopped by. He was able to see them. He had his most favorite meal, my grandmother's potato soup and cornbread. And while we were there, I asked my aunt where my cousin was. And she said, oh, she's with Luke. And of course, I'm like, well, who's Luke? Oh, that's her new boyfriend. And I said, I am so glad I do not have to deal with dating anymore. That was about 9 p.m. on Saturday evening. And we woke up about 8:15 Sunday morning, and he was in distress. So there are many times that I go back and think about that last day, and I look back with a thankful heart that God took that regret from me, because had that situation went just a smidge different, and maybe I had pouted or held that against him, the rest of my life I would have regretted that last day. So I think through the years, I've learned to give myself some grace in situations, and tried. That really was my last day with him. And you hear all the time, you should live like it's your last day. And that is what I try to do, because I always want to leave a relationship in a place that I will not regret it if it is the end. Do I do that 100% of the time? No, because I'm still a woman. I still have hormones, and I still, sometimes just can't even believe myself. But I try really hard to leave things in a good place. But yeah, I don't know.
That's something that just hit home whenever you said it, for sure. Because I am that kind of powder at times, or I'll, go sleep on the couch because I'm real pissed. You can look, you've heard the podcast. You know how the story goes.
I mean, it's real life,
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes you have to give yourself space, but you just,
That's beautiful.
Is that the way you want to leave it? I guess.
Right.
Okay. So I do remember the question. So it probably was about, I don't know, close to a year after Chris passed away, that my best friend of now 27 years says, I don't know where you are right now, but my husband has a coworker, and he's going through a divorce, and I think you guys would really hit it off if you feel like you just want to meet someone for a friendship or companionship. So I thought about it for a while, and he and I did actually end up talking, or whatever you want to call it, casually dating for a while. But what ended up happening is, about 3 years after Chris died, I guess now the kids call it someone slid into my DMs, right? Is that the cool lingo now? It actually was Chris's cousin, third cousin. And he and I had met a couple of times when Chris was alive, and I don't know, we just started messaging. We went out on a couple of dates, and then we just kind of quit talking for a little bit. And so I felt like I'm an adult, and I just gonna ask, like, what's happening. And he said, I just don't. He's gonna kill me for telling this, by the way. He hates this story. So he said, I just don't think you're what I'm looking for. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess he didn't want some hot mess widow, right? So I'm like, oh, fair enough. And we just kind of went on about our lives. And I don't know, about 2 years, not even quite 2 years, about a year and a half later, he messaged me again and apologized for the way he had ended things, and asked if he could take me out on a date again. So we went out on a date, and the next morning messaged, and I joked and said, well, I guess I'll talk to you in a couple of years. The next day he messaged me and asked if it'd been 2 years yet. And
that's sweet.
9 years in November. So it worked out. But he's been very patient. It's hard enough. I know, Sarah, you've been divorced, and it's hard, I imagine, once you've been married to someone else, and now you have, like, you're co-parenting, or you are, you have someone of significance that used to be in your life that's still kind of present. Okay. That's difficult. But have you ever tried living up to a dead man? Right? Because when someone dies, you kind of put them on this pedestal,
Yeah.
And that's really hard. And that takes a strong person. And I've been really blessed, because my husband, his name's Stacy, he is amazing. He is amazing at all things. I think Sarah can attest to that. He's willing to get in and help with anything at all. and he's just a big goofball himself. And I don't know, he's been very forgiving. It was trial and error for me in the beginning because I did live by myself for a total of 5 years after Chris died. And I think you have a lot of time for clarity in that amount of time. That there are things you're willing to put up with and things you aren't.
Yeah.
So I was very much in the know of what I was willing to accept and what I wasn't. So you either were that or you weren't that, and it was fine with me. But I did kind of have to adjust to, living with someone else again, and kind of not okaying, but you kind of want to keep each other in the loop, and that was kind of difficult in the beginning. But he loves me for me, all of my broken pieces. He's awesome.
You have such a beautiful way of just how you explain all of it, your last day with him, and how God, took that regret from you. I think that's such a beautiful thing to say, because how many people do feel regret for the last interaction that they had with somebody that they loved. I just think that that's to recognize that first and foremost, to say that I don't have to live with that. God took that from me, took that burden from me, is so beautiful. But then also to see, this relationship come to light several years later, and to recognize that, it came with a lot of broken pieces, as you said, or baggage, however you want to say it. But just, you know, both of you, I'm sure he would say the same thing about you, that you've been very patient, and, you've really, because that's to overcome that in general, to overcome such a tragic loss, and then to be able to move on and give yourself so fully to someone else without fear. Is this going to happen to me again? Or
that fear
is
yeah, it's my worst fear. Yeah,
I was going to say, I think that would be for certain one of my biggest fears. And so I'm certain he says the same thing about you, but just, you have such a beautiful way um, of just explaining your second marriage, and not comparing it. And, do you think that it's helpful that he knew Chris? And I mean, helpful to you in that you can talk about him, and he's not jealous, or um, have any kind of like mixed feelings?
right. Yeah. Some people, that technically my daughter is related to him. And so West Virginia, we get some looks. It's fine. It's fine. It's okay. No, that's true, because, he remembers Chris as a young boy, and I mean, he just understands. I mean, there have been other circumstances that have happened, that really put it into perspective for him. Because, sometimes you're really close to a situation and maybe you don't see that, this situation already.
Yeah.
Right before we got married, I acquired 3 stepsons. I don't like to call them stepsons, 3 bonus sons, in this marriage. And I never thought I'd be a boy mom, but here I am. So they lost their uncle just before Stacy and I got married. And I remember him sitting there saying, what is she going to do? She's got 2 young kids to raise by herself. And I just sat there just waiting for the light bulb to go off, and then it just kind of did. He was like, oh, that's kind of what you're doing. I'm like, yeah, it's not going to be easy, but she's going to do it. I mean, it's not fair. None of this is fair, but that's not what we signed up for. Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to look back and wish that never happened, because knowing without that happening, I wouldn't have the life that I have now.
Yeah.
If there was this magical way to wish everything turned out the way it did without him dying, of course, that's what I would want. but my mind can't reconcile one without the other. So,
Right.
that's hard, you know, anyways. So
No, I think it's
that's
beautiful though.
super sad.
Yeah, but I think like in hearing you, I never had the honor of knowing Chris, but I have, got to see you and Stacy together, and through our friendship and things. I don't think that perhaps another God thing with it, that there could have been someone else picked out for you that was just such a compliment to all of the things that you do, and how he also does those things and seems to kind of rise to the occasion with it as well. I mean, you guys exemplify in so many different ways what a great partnership is. And this is me seeing it from the outside, or from whenever we're in meetings or hanging out or whatever else, but I feel like that he also takes like an extra step, maybe to let you know that you're important, or that the things that matter to you are also important to him. Like, he had no business helping us out with that alumni association as much as what he did. God bless,
Right.
but he always would. And even like whenever I would like go on a wild trip or something else, like he would message me just knowing that I was one of your friends and being like, hey, this is cool, or what's going on. Like, that's a different person. And I think that if you could pick a person out for one of your friends, I mean, that would be, again, I may have never had the honor of meeting Chris, but to know how Stacy is, it's just what a beautiful joining of two great husbands you truly do have in this.
It's true. See, I mean, I've been right this whole time. God gave me two really great husbands. And when some people struggle to get one. So
Right.
I understand how blessed I am.
So lucky.
I do not take them for granted. Either
No.
one, I promise.
That's sweet that you have been so deeply loved by two men. I mean, how many people can truly say that?
It's kind of a joke. My mom's going to kill me for saying this, but my mom's been married a couple of times. I told her, I was like, that's it. You're not allowed to pick out anybody else by yourself anymore. Like, they have to come through me because I'm pretty good at it.
You're the gatekeeper from now on.
Definitely.
I mean, yeah.
So I have a question for you, because grief is it's messy, and a lot of people don't like to talk about grief, but for some reason I just dive right in, because I also I find it's so interesting, the spiritual connection that can still exist after someone passes. At least that's, I can only really compare it to the loss of my dad. That's certainly the deepest loss that I've ever had. I was very close to my grandparents as well, but there's just something between like a parent child, or like husband wife, I would say, is also in that same category. And one of the most beautiful things that I think comes out is, at least for me, is you get these, whatever you want to call them, like a God wink, or like, you just know they're there. You just know it with every single fiber within your body that they are there with you. And so I'm curious if you feel that, or if you ever get those sort of winks from Chris.
Yellow butterflies.
Okay.
Constantly. So the day that he passed away was a Sunday, and his funeral was the following Thursday. It had been just icky rainy the entire week, but the day of his funeral was beautiful. And when we got to the cemetery, just as they were opening the hearse, two yellow butterflies flew between the pallbearers. And there are many times that we always see them in twos or threes. And we just, even the girls are like, okay, Dad, we see you. We see you. We know. My oldest daughter, whom, in interest of full disclosure, Chris was not her biological father. I had her young, and I'm more than happy to tell that story in a moment. But that was his daughter. There was no telling him otherwise. She was his, and she graduated high school from our high school exactly 20 years later. She's class of 2020.
Wow.
So when she decorated her cap, she chose to decorate it with a yellow butterfly, and it said, I made it, Dad. So yes, those are our God winks. And still now we see them regularly, it's sometimes we say something, sometimes we just smile, but we all notice. Even the boys are starting to, oh, there's butterflies, but,
Yeah. There's just something about those little visuals that will give you so much comfort. And I think anybody that's ever struggled with a loss, when those moments happen, like, I mean, I'll catch myself like laughing out loud or just like I get this big smile on my face because you could not convince me otherwise that it's not him.
right.
And, I'll tell a quick story. We had, right after I left, right after my dad passed away, I was up at his farm with his widow, and we were sitting on the front porch, just sitting there on rocking chairs, just talking. And it was a beautiful evening, not no wind, no nothing. And he lived on top of a hill, but this like a tornado of leaves, kind of like cycloned, like danced around the front yard. And his widow Lori was, we just kind of looked at each other like that was wild. Like there was, the leaves weren't, the trees were just as still as can be, and this like tornado comes through of these leaves. We were like, that's wild. And so fast forward to last month, I'm out in Colorado and my kids are going horseback riding for the first time. And that was something my dad and I, a passion that we shared, was horses. And I walked to put my purse in the car, and I was walking back, and this giant storm of dust flies out of nowhere, and this tornado just barrels through this entire corral of horses. I mean, there must have been 100 horses. And I mean, they're going wild. I mean, it was like a movie scene from the Wild West. I mean, these horses are like, ready to rear up, and you could tell they're super spooked. And it's like, and everybody's like, what is happening? Like, what's happening? Is this a twister coming through? And it was like, I knew, like, you can't convince me otherwise that was a sign from him, how excited that he was that my kids were about to take their first ride on horseback. And I just think that when you can find those winks, it helps your grief so much, or it just kind of reminds us that they're gone, but they're still with us as, I believe, like guardian angels. I think that he watches over me. I'm sure your husband, I'm sure Chris watches over you and the girls and the boys, and probably even Stacy, his cousin. I think that it's just that really gentle, kind of beautiful reminder that they're not lost, that they're still with us. You just can't see them. And so I love that you have that and that you've experienced that as well, because I think it's one of the most powerful things that can come from such great loss.
No. Yeah. It's hard to think about somebody just no longer being here at all. There has to be some part of them, right? And
right.
Even if the thing is, my youngest daughter looks exactly like me, except her eyes. When you're looking at her, you're looking at her dad's eyes, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's something so final about it all.
No, you're right. It's final. I think that's part of what's so hard, is the finality of how your life ends. Like you said, like that part, all the things that you all used to do and you shared together ended that day,
Yeah.
but you've been so fortunate to sort of restart, and you have all these new memories with Stacy. And how do you said he had 3 sons, is that correct?
Yes.
How did that, I mean, like you said, they're related, so I guess there was some help in that, but how has that been, blending those two sets of children together over the years? Because I'm under the impression they were a little bit older.
So when we got married in 2014, so he has twin boys who are going to be 20 in December. And then he has a son who just turned 16. So essentially, right, it was like we had 2 sets of twins. Yeah. And then because, my daughter's getting ready to turn 16. So they're just 5 months apart.
Wow.
Honestly, they blended really well. it doesn't happen like that normally. I'm well aware of that.
Yeah.
Like, they just did. We were very careful. We really didn't have them around each other. That was something when I started dating, I was very guarded with who
Yeah.
was around the girls. Because one thing, my personal opinion is any parent who is dating, and I know Sarah talked about this, when she was starting to date, they've already been through so much. So to allow them to get attached to someone else and then that not work out, that was just devastating for me to think about. So I didn't, they were in such a, in my mind, a fragile state. In reality, kids are so resilient, but why put them through anything that wasn't necessary? So Stacy and I dated for quite some time before we had our first, what we call family date. It was a very eventful date. We all went roller skating, and I fell and broke my elbow.
No, you
So
that is eventful.
I'm not sure that we've been skating since. So
Fair.
But they were very well-rounded kids already, thankfully, and I don't take for granted how easily that process happened for us, because I know I've heard horror stories growing up. I never had to deal with any of that growing up. My parents were never married to each other even. So I didn't have a sibling until he was born the end of our freshman year of high school. So I just never really had to deal with anything like that. So I was a little nervous because what did I know about blending a family? I had never had siblings really to speak of. And they just always felt at home with each other. I mean, yes, technically they were related, but they hadn't been around each other a bunch, they did have some mutual family, and, they were a little younger. So they were trying to figure out, wait, how do how come this person? And I'm like, well, remember daddy's cousin? And, it got kind of confusing for a little bit, but they did really well. The only, no, they really didn't have any big things either. There was nothing.
Would you say they're close now that they're
I think they're close like siblings.
Yeah. Like they think of each other.
The question I always got was, how do they get along? I'm like, they get along like siblings,
Right.
like they fight with each other, but nobody else can mess with them,
Yeah.
And it's a little bit their ages too. Like I said, my oldest daughter, she is getting ready to turn 22. The twins are almost 20, and then a 16-year-old and a 15-year-old. So 10th and 11th grade is what we're getting ready to start here. One is away at college. The other one chose a non-traditional route, and he actually works at Snowshoe year-round.
Okay.
And our oldest daughter is going to school to be a nail tech. That's what she's been wanting to do. 2020 kind of put a hold on that, but they're all doing vastly different things, but they're doing it well, I guess. And they all know they can come back home. They're actually they're all home right now. This is the first time in a while all 5 of my children are residing in this house right now. At least the one that works at Snowshoe, he's going back to work either this evening or early in the morning. And then the other twin, he goes to Hampton, Sydney in Farmville, Virginia. So he's headed back there Sunday. So this will be the last time my kids are under one roof until Christmas, probably.
Aww.
If then.
You see, I love how easily you just say my kids, our children. Like that just is what you are. And I think that's what you exemplify so well that, no one would know any different. And I think that's how it should be. But I think one thing that I've also gotten from you and from our friendship is how, and I don't know, maybe your name should be Grace, because I've used that now twice to describe you, but
Oh my
How
gosh, you know what? My grandmother used to say my name should be Grace.
No, she
Because I'm so,
didn't.
yes, because I'm so clumsy though.
Oh, that's so wild. How
It's
about
so
that?
funny. Maybe that was the God wink to my mama. Look at that.
That was. How cool. No, but for me, what that means is just how well you handle things and how well you handle like different relationships even. And being a bonus parent, so much of my experience with that, I have turned to you as a guide in a lot of that, or just as an example of how well you manage those things as part of everything else that you do and have been through. I just think no matter what, maybe it's innately in you, you have this like parenting spirit that just lets you guide and manage and do well in those situationships, in those situations, so that it isn't even like a problem, or I don't know, it's just very gracefully done. And it's just something that I guess it's just within you, that it just doesn't even seem like it's something, but it is something amazing and huge that you just do.
I appreciate you saying so. I think for me, it's once Stacy and I got married, I just didn't. I don't look at them like they're my stepchildren. They live with me, so they're mine. I'm going to love them and protect them the same as my own. I respect the fact that they have a mother. It so happens that she doesn't live in our area. I try to be very mindful of that. She's their mom, so I take it very seriously that it's my job to love them as my own in her stead when she's not here. And I hope they understand that, I hope they understand how much I love them. I try to tell them that all the time. They're boys, so it's different. Boys are kind of gross. So it's taken me, some time to get used to that. But they're good boys, and it helps. They're adorable. And they're really tall, so I never have to get on a ladder.
No, they are super tall. They're right. Super tall.
Yeah. So I've got Morgan, my car baby. I'll have to tell you that story. So she's 5'1", and then tiny. The tallest of our twins is 6'6".
Oh my gosh.
So she stands up and he gets on his knees, and he's still just a smidge taller than her. Just a smidge. It's great.
Wow. Okay. That is amazing. Yes, and you do have to tell us about the car baby, because God love her that you
get that name.
Because my entire life hasn't been depressing.
It's always exciting.
Just a couple of chapters, right? So, I got pregnant with Morgan when I was 18 years old. And when I was about 30 weeks pregnant, and it just so happened on Labor Day. Like, seriously, this stuff, you just can't make it up. I was having a lot of back pain. I called my OB, and I'd had a lot of issues with being dehydrated. And he said, well, it sounds like you're probably getting dehydrated again. Because again, 30 weeks pregnant. He said, drink some Gatorade, take a couple of Tylenol. If you don't feel better in 2 hours, call. So I followed directions, and I felt okay, and I fell asleep. But what happened is about 3:00 in the morning, I woke up with a little bit of a cramp, and then I fell back asleep. and then at 3:05, and then every 5 minutes until 5:00. So at 5:00, I woke up, and then at 5:03, there it was again. So for some reason, that 2 minutes, I was like, oh, well, maybe this is real. So most people not in our area, not going to be familiar with, I grew up in a small town called Salt Rock. And town
close
is
to everything.
Being gracious, right? So at about 5:30 that morning, I had to be carried to the car because at this point I could no longer walk. And, this is 2001. Cell phones were barely a thing.
Yeah.
They definitely weren't a thing in Salt Rock. So we also 2001. So there's still coal trucks which is not really much of a thing anymore. So we get on State Route 10 and we're traveling towards Huntington and get caught behind a coal truck.
Good God.
And, I just knew, and my mom, I love her, but she underplays everything. I broke my arm in high school. She said, it's not broken, it's just fractured. Okay. So we're on our way. We're in the car. And I don't know if either of you are familiar with Doss Hill on Route 10, but at the top of the hill, I thought, okay, I think maybe she's coming. And I didn't even know if it was a girl at this point, by the way, but I knew it was a girl, but I didn't officially. So my mom's infamous words were, oh, honey, the baby's just putting pressure on your bladder. You're okay. And she crowned at the bottom of the hill.
Oh my God.
And so I delivered her. And we're still just driving along Route 10 until we get to 16th Street Road, which is where you finally get cell service. And then there are also streetlights. So now my mom realizes that I've had this child.
So the baby is like literally like there. Like she's
literally
out.
there.
Like
I
out.
had her on my chest. Yes.
Holy.
Had her on my chest, just, rubbing her back.
Look at you.
Because it seemed like the right thing to do.
Internally, are you freaking out at this point? I mean,
no.
Are you
No, Candice is so good under pressure.
I mean, you are
so
like a saint at this point.
I genuinely, it's so funny because we actually just, my friends and I just spent some time in Snowshoe this weekend, and they asked about this story on the way home. So, and that's what my friend said. She was like, were you not scared? And I go, not until like 2 days later. But the day of, I mean, it was just what I had to do, right? So I'm holding her on my chest, I'm rubbing her back, and she's not crying because, again, I'm only 30 weeks, but we get to the hospital, they take her immediately, and the man who was taking me to labor and delivery, he was just making small talk, and he was like, oh my gosh, honey, you look so young. How old are you? So then it clicks, and I went, oh, I'm 19 today. I got you, Jenny. That's a surprise.
You had her on your birthday.
I did.
Oh my gosh. This is wild.
Right? It's like you can't even make this stuff up.
No.
So yeah.
You need to write a book.
She does. She does.
Most boring book ever.
No.
But, she and I took her to Vegas last year. I turned 40. She turned 21.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
We went to Vegas.
That's really cool. And why'd you name her Morgan?
Well, honestly, when I was in high school, I did an internship at an elementary school, and there was a little girl in my class. Her name was Alex, but she had a cute little sister named Morgan, and it was the cutest baby I'd ever seen.
Oh,
So I fell in love with that name.
The name. So
although my uncle wanted me to name her Kia because she was born in a Kia Sportage.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
I kind of see where he's going with that.
Yeah.
I lost what I had a question for you, and then I just lost it. What was I going to ask you? It'll come to me.
I've got one. If people are listening right now, like, and can just maybe are going through this, or whatever, like, what would be one piece of advice that you would just say to them that maybe nobody else can because we've not been in that place or through that situation? Like, whether it be, again, like the loss of the spouse, going through all that, or taking the brave step of just stepping back in again. Like, of any piece of this, what would be your piece of advice, or what would you say to them?
I'm honestly, the biggest piece, you have to give yourself grace. I think people get so hung up on how they should be reacting, or what they think they should be doing, or what they think they should be saying. And you just have to go at your own pace. Okay. In the years since Chris has passed, I have noticed you get a lot of judgment, right, in the community. Everybody's an expert on everything. And it is really hard to know what you would do unless you're in that situation yourself. So even how I reacted may not be how you would react, or it may not be what's in your best interest. You have to give each other grace. But most importantly, you have to give yourself grace, because no one's perfect. We're all figuring this out. Any situation you've been in, most likely it's the first time you've been in this situation. So you just have to stay true to yourself. However you think you should handle it is the right way. There are always going to be people who are there, willing to help you. I was really lucky. I had a great support system. I'm blessed. I have both of my parents. When Chris passed away, I had both of my grandparents, and Sarah knows my grandmother and I were very close. I lived with her the majority of the time growing up, so she was my constant. So Sarah was there. She knows when I lost my grandmother in 2021, that kind of sent me in a tailspin. And so who did I message? I messaged Sarah. I was like, okay, I got to talk to somebody. Who am I talking to? Because I needed that. And that's okay. I wish, back then, I wish that I had spoke to somebody when Chris died in 2009. There are services available. You don't have to go to a formal therapist, but you can. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Did I end up going a long time? No, I think I went 3 sessions, but that's what I needed.
Yeah.
I needed someone outside of the situation just to listen and say, really just to listen. She really didn't say that much. She got me thinking about a few things, but I needed just a sounding board with zero judgment. Not that I didn't have that with friends. That's not what I mean, but that's not fair of me to ask Sarah to listen to my problems. Everybody's got problems of their own. But you have people that are willing to listen. That's the biggest thing. Just, you can't hold it all in.
Yeah.
You just have to talk about things.
Yeah. And you've got to be willing to ask for help too. I think I often think back to, I probably could have used some therapy because you have this timeline in your head. You're like, okay, I can grieve for this amount of time. Or just you're going through each step and you're like, you certainly go through sort of like that angry phase where everyone else's life isn't just in shambles, just yours. And why does everybody else get to be happy and I have to deal with this shit? I'm certain you went through something similar to that, and just that, that anger piece that takes over, and you've got to really give yourself that opportunity to feel that and move through that, and know that eventually, people always say, it takes time or it gets better with time. And I think it's just, you move through, you give yourself that grace to really feel all of those feelings that come with deep loss.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually don't think it gets better with time. I'm probably the exception to that. I don't think it gets better. I think it gets different.
Different. Yeah.
You just,
it's better.
I work in a family practice office now, and there have been many circumstances where we've had women lose their husbands. So then, because I've been there, we'll talk about it. And the first question they always ask 100% of the time is, when does it stop hurting? So my response is, well, I'll let you know if it ever happens, because it doesn't. It just hurts different down the road. And I think you find that with any loss, not just the loss of a spouse. I think you just wake up one day and realize maybe you smiled more today than you did yesterday. And that's a win. If you smiled more today than you did yesterday, then you're winning, and just take that win and build on that tomorrow. But don't be discouraged if tomorrow you don't smile as much, because there are just some days that you're going to be sad, and that's okay. You can't torture yourself for being sad. What kind of relationship would you have lost if you weren't glad that you lost it?
Yeah. the opposite of love is indifference, right?
Mm.
Mhm.
And so it says so much if it's still not so much painful, but just that yearning for that person. I think that's what never goes away is is the yearning to still have them here.
Oh, Chris was big into movies and music, which, as Sarah pointed out to me the other day, we're a very musical family, anyways. But anytime a new song comes on, I'll wish he could hear it,
Yeah.
or I'll know that that's something that he would like, and um, it's just. Sorry, my dog just ran down here and distracted me. Yeah, it's good to it's good to think of him that way, though, instead
Right.
of not thinking of him at all, I guess but every time something big happens, our daughter started high school last year, he missed it.
Yeah.
When it comes to the anniversary of his death, I'll usually, post what he missed this year, our daughter graduating. He has an older daughter from his first marriage, and he has two grandsons. Like he's not here watching them grow up, and they don't get to know their papa or whatever they would have called him. So I guess I'm aware of all of that, but I try not to dwell on that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyways.
Well, you handle it, like I think we've said 100 times, just with such grace. And I think that this episode is going to really help people that are going through it. I can think of an acquaintance that I know who lost her husband last year, and she has small children. And just people over time. I've got friends whose parents passed away and then their parents eventually remarried, and very kind of similar stories in some ways. Really, they have these beautiful blended families now. And I just think the message at the end of the day is that just because someone you love, their life ends, doesn't mean that yours has to. And that there's still something beautiful on the other side of it once you get through the yucks, as we say on this show. That's a big yuck, and I'm sure it takes a long time to get through it. And you're probably still days not totally through it, but something so beautiful can be on the other side. And so that hope for people, just knowing that, okay, it may not get better, they're never coming back, but something beautiful lies ahead. And I think that's ultimately what we all are looking for in our lives is hope, moving forward. So thank you for being willing to open the wound, because I'm sure it's not easy to talk about, and especially in a public forum, but we appreciate you being so honest and willing to share your story. It really is um, inspiring in many ways. My question, when I couldn't think, I was like, I had a thought and I can't remember, is what do you do for a living? Because I was like, I hope you're in some sort of healthcare, mental health care, some sort of setting. And it sounds like you are, where you're, a support for people.
Yeah, I work for a true private practice, family practice doctor in Huntington. So we do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Sometimes that job is heavy, because it is genuine small practice, and I know all of our patients by name. So that's a double-edged sword. Get a lot of attachments there too, but again, like, it just has to be worth it, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of, there's this nurse, I think her name's Nurse Hadley, but she's a hospice nurse, and she wrote a book. I got to look up the name of it and we'll tag it, but it's basically like short stories that she's collected over the years from her patients that have passed away. And it's, I haven't read it yet. It just came out. She just released it like a month ago, but it is one that I've been looking forward to getting on my book list. I'll share it with you whenever I can remember the name of it. I don't know. Of course, I can't ever think of anything in the moment. Typical, no memory whatsoever. What is also very interesting to me is like listening to you talk and watching you on the screen. I can like see flashbacks of your face from what was it now, like 23 years ago?
Yeah.
Since we have been in school. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can like completely see your face. Like I remember exactly what you look like. That's it's kind of wild to me. I don't know. Is it just me? I think I have like a real memory issue. I just
I just think we all look exactly the same.
Me too.
yeah.
I don't think it's a memory issue at all.
I always think it's what my mom's like, do you remember? And I'm like, nope. I need a picture. I need like a visual because just names are like gone.
Yeah.
When you work in a
That's
school and you deal with names all the time, it's like, it's just, I'm a visual, I guess, person.
I don't know. My best friend and I were that kind of that same way. I usually remember the names though. She remembers the faces. I remember the names.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It all works out, right? Well, like
Right.
Jen said, thanks so much. Like again, for everything. And like what she said, I think that just hearing your story and how beautifully you describe things and how, I don't know, I want to say the words apropos, but I'm not even sure that's it. So all these grammar wordsmiths, Jen, check me later. It is that a butterfly is like your symbol because it is that of transformation, but it's always one that is just a sweet, warming token whenever we're able to see it. But it also is a symbol of so much. And for that to be yours, I just think is great too. So I'm really appreciative.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope when you asked me to do this, I thought, I just don't feel like I have anything meaningful to say, but I appreciate you thinking that I do.
The four-letter word I use most often when talking to Candice is stop. She'll say things like that. No, just
usually in all caps.
stop. Stop.
We keep going back and forth. Like, we're like, why did we start this? Like, whenever we're, talking about topics or whatever we want to discuss on this podcast, and we're like, we want to bring real stories of real people that are going through the things that we're going through at this age. And, a little bit of all of it, the good, the fun stuff that we're doing, but the yucks are just like part of life right now. And I think that there's so much strength and hope and beauty in listening to people, regular people like us. We're not some celebrities. We're not some sort of like, Harvard doctors on here telling you how to deal with grief. This is a real person that has experienced this incredible loss, and this is how she moved through it. And I think I personally get super inspired when I hear stories like this. It just makes me think, if you are going through a dark time, if they can get through it, I can get through it. They're just like me. And that's ultimately what we want to share, and hope that that's what we're bringing to our community that listens to this podcast. So people are going to be inspired by you. They're going to be affected by your story and the hope that comes with it. So it is a story. It's a great story to tell. It's not finished yet because you definitely are going to have a book at some point. I can feel that.
I hope so.
Because it just, I think that I'm sure you've got more stories. If you could rip off those in the hour that we just sat down to record this, there's more there. So don't give up on that. But yeah. So until next week, we're going to close it out. Thank you, Candice. Sis, and catch us next week for an all new episode of the LYLAS podcast.
Till then, take care.